You're very pro-choice. You believe in a woman's right to choose. You believe in gender mixed marriages or gay marriage. You believe that states ought to recognize those throughout. If I say something that is inappropriate, please tell me.
I don't know about inappropriate, but Senator Tom Coburn was not wasting his time with Elena Kagan. Some tough questions, finally, for the Supreme Court nominee.
Coburn clearly has asked the toughest questions in these hearings, and we'll be talking to him in just a few moments. Top Line begins right now.
Hello and welcome to ABC News Washington Post Top Line. I'm Rick Klein.
And I'm Jonathan Karl.
Every day at noon Eastern, we're right here bringing you the latest political news and analysis, everything you need to know, and it's twitter.com/thenote to know even more. John, you're up on the Hill again today for Kagan Day 2, Round 2. What do you think?
And the top line is smooth sailing. Kagan has had these people laughing back here. This has been almost like the Kagan comedy hour. She's clearly charmed the committee. Doubt that she's convinced any of the Republicans that were clearly opposed to her coming into this, but there is nothing that has been said that would get in the way of her confirmation.
That is the bottom line through all of this. Some of the tough questions, some Republicans are turning up the heat a little bit, but she's funny, and she's disarmed them with that sense of humor. Clearly, she's been through this drill a couple times before. Next up, blast from Blago. This guy is the gift that keeps on giving. Rod Blagojevich's trial yesterday had some very interesting testimony from Tom Balanoff, who's a local labor leader in Illinois. Picture this, John. The night before the presidential election, he gets a call from Barack Obama himself saying, by the way, I think Valerie Jarrett may be a good choice for the Senate. Not that I'm taking sides at all here, but this is earlier and more direct involvement around the machinations for that Senate seat than we've ever heard the White House acknowledge.
And it was clear that that message was going to be referred directly on to Governor Blagojevich. But what's interesting here is that although this trial has gotten very little attention outside of Chicago, in Chicago, it has, of course, been the big news. Next up, meet the press. We talked yesterday about how two top Republican senatorial candidates, Sharon Angle out in Nevada, Mark Kirk in Illinois, had been avoiding reporters. They both had their moments of truth yesterday. Kirk apologizing for exaggerations in his biography. And Sharon Angle, interesting interview with John Ralston out in Reno, Nevada. She was asked about her statements about unemployment benefits and whether or not she would vote to extend them. Here's what she had to say.
How would you have voted on that bill to extend unemployment benefits?
I would have voted no, because the truth about it is that they keep extending these unemployment benefits to the point where people are afraid to go out and get a job because the job doesn't pay as much as the unemployment benefit does. And what we really need to do is put people back to work.
Well, I'll tell you, that is some candor out of Sharon Angle. We've heard debate up here on Capitol Hill about whether or not the unemployment extension should be paid for, but I have heard no sitting member of the United States Senate actually come out in opposition to unemployment benefits as they are now configured.
And this is a state, of course, Nevada, where they've been battered by the economic recession, the tourism and travel industry down across the board. Finally today, Clinton v. Obama. Bill Clinton is out on his own once again. This time he's breaking with the Democratic establishment to endorse Andrew Romanoff for the Democratic nomination for Senate out in Colorado. That is not the White House choice, who is incumbent Senator Michael Bennet. And it's interesting, there's some back history here with Romanoff and Clinton, but he's not afraid to go out there on his own, even when it's going against the entire Democratic establishment. We've seen him save establishment candidates in the past. This is the first time, though, you see him in public opposition to the favored choice of the White House.
And Romanoff is a candidate that embarrassed the White House by going public with the fact that they had tried to give him a job to get him out of that Senate race. So it's quite an act by the former president, although it's worth noting, Rick, that Bill Clinton will not actually be out there campaigning for him. He's just kind of quietly endorsed him. But this is clearly something of a shot across the bow to the Obama White House. So we sat down just a few moments ago with Senator Tom Coburn, as we said, has been asking some of the toughest questions. Here's the interview. We're joined now by Senator Tom Coburn, Republican of Oklahoma and a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Coburn, welcome to Top Line.
Good afternoon, or morning, I guess it is.
You know, you asked some really pointed questions last night of Elena Kagan, but for the most part, this hearing seems to have had more jokes than hard questions. Now, I'm wondering if, A, you're concerned at all about the kind of levity that we've seen in this hearing, and whether or not Elena Kagan has managed to charm this committee.
Well, I think it goes back to the issue. You know, I gave a speech on the floor several weeks ago about whether or not the hearings have any purpose, because they certainly didn't with Sotomayor's hearing, because what she told us she's violated twice already. And the Senate hasn't always had these hearings. This is a relatively new phenomenon in our country's history, and I'm not sure they're beneficial for us other than to show, to be a show. So my hope is to make them as serious as they can be, and also ask the hard questions so that the American people can see what somebody believes, what they think. And she also had written an article about she thought she ought to be forthright. I'm not sure she's as forthright as she professed that others should be.
You had a long exchange last night where you asked her about the constitutionality of a hypothetical veggie law, that whether Congress can require you to eat your vegetables as a way to get at the Commerce Clause. I think everyone was assuming you were talking about the health care bill. What was your read on her reaction? Do you think that she would vote to uphold the constitutionality of the health care law based on her exchange with you last night?
Well, I think the thing that's very worrisome is that she has a very expansive view of the Commerce Clause, and I find that she's ignorant of the Constitution's limitation of that, especially what our founders wrote. And her reliance was that, well, here's the precedent that's been set, and we can't go back to original intent, which comes back to another thing that she said earlier in the hearing, is that precedent trumps original intent. And I think most Americans would reject that. If that was the case, then we would have never had Brown versus the Board of Education, and Plessy Ferguson would still be the law. And to have a Supreme Court nominee that actually says precedent trumps the original intent is worrisome in my opinion.
So based on what you've heard from her here and what you knew about her before the hearings even got started, where would she fit on the court? I mean, do you have any doubt that she would be firmly implanted on the left side of the court?
No, but I would think you would expect that from President Obama. I don't you know, that elections do have consequences. He has the right. The question is should we vote for somebody who's going to expand the role of the federal government by sitting on the bench on the Supreme Court, or somebody who's going to go back to the original intent that recognizes states' rights and puts more responsibility outside of Washington instead of more in Washington? Less of a nanny state rather than more of a nanny state.
As I'm sure you've heard, Senator Sessions, the ranking Republican on the committee, has raised some serious questions about her truthfulness, really, regarding the military recruiters issue at Harvard. I know you share some of those concerns, and now you're saying that you think she's ignorant of a major constitutional principle. Does any of this, in your mind, amount to the question that's going to come of extraordinary circumstances? If these are pretty serious charges that you're talking about here, are these extraordinary charges?
Well, I think that you can sum up the military recruiting issue at Harvard is that she valued the doctrine of Harvard more than she valued the U.S. law. And I don't know whether she's been forthright or not. I don't know the details and what actually went on there. But her decision was to honor Harvard's rules more than honor the law. And I think that's problematic.
How is it problematic enough, though, that you start thinking about extraordinary circumstances?
Well, I'm not going to go there. I don't know. I think what we have to do is finish the hearing and see what she said and see what people's take is on it.
But you would not rule out a filibuster of this nomination?
I wouldn't rule out a filibuster. And look, my two main concerns is we're in trouble as a nation. And one of the reasons we're in trouble is the expansion of the federal government into areas that our founders never thought we should be in. And we have a nominee to the Supreme Court that is fully embracing that and with no limits in terms of the Commerce Clause. So to me, that's very concerning. The second point I would make again is that she believes precedent trumps original intent. And she defended that. And so both those things are very concerning. It should be very concerning to the American people.
So let me ask you, the name Thurgood Marshall has been invoked repeatedly here. Obviously, she clerked for Thurgood Marshall. He was a mentor to her. How would you have voted, knowing all that you know? I mean, now you know how his entire record as a justice. Would you have voted no on a Thurgood Marshall nomination? I have
no idea. I don't know his writings, and I haven't. I think that's an important part of her history, but I don't think it's near as important as the two things that I just mentioned.
Well, let me ask you somebody maybe you're a little more familiar with, Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the court now. She was confirmed without a single no vote by the United States Senate. Knowing what you know about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, is that a vote you would have cast? Would you have voted for her nomination?
Well, again, I can't tell you, but I did watch some of her hearings when I was not in politics at the time, And the fact is that she didn't ever answer a question. So, you know, you ought to have to answer a question. And she answered none.
And you think Elena Kagan is more on that line, along those lines so far, not answering the questions?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying she has answered some questions. She's put up some statements that are very controversial to the American public as a whole.
But okay, but so we have to go. But just so I have you right, that you cannot say now whether or not you would have voted yes on the confirmation of either Thurgood Marshall or Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
That's not a question I have the knowledge or experience with which to know.
Okay. All right, Senator Tom Coburn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Senator.